This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
Okay, I was just seeing that there's going to be a video that works today, unlike a few other ones that I have played. Okay, so before we start today, there are a few announcements. So in the outline of what is happening each week, there was actually a class scheduled for next Friday. So not this one, but Friday week. That's public holiday. So there isn't a class then, and that's a public holiday that the whole university does take. That was meant to be a lecture by Peter, and he usually has one about the term paper to ask questions. So not necessarily about telling you what to do, but I guess if you want, because it's getting to the final stages of the term paper about now. So as a reminder for your term paper, there are two components. So you have a presentation, and then you actually have a document. So the presentation, please submit your posters by Monday the 7th at 5 p.m. via LMS. There should be a template up on LMS for that. I have set it so it's the correct size. I think it was to A1. So if you don't change the scaling, so that when it gets, we'll turn it into a PDF and print it off. So don't change what size the slide is. That should all be correct to what we're going to print it to, but the template is there. Please, please, please have it submitted by Monday, 5 p.m. We're asking you to do that so that we will print off everybody's for the poster presentations. That also means that once it's submitted, it's submitted. So if you do your presentation on the first day as compared to the last day, we're trying to minimise the advantages or the differences between groups that go at the very beginning and the very end. So please have it by Monday, 7th of October, so that's the Monday after the mid-sem break. And then the document is due that Friday at 5 p.m. via LMS. I've set up LMS so that the portals to submit it should open 2 weeks before that date. So if you can't see it now, it should pop up soon. Next week, start of next week, for the poster, and then on the Friday for the term paper. So your poster presentations, they're going to be held on 5 days. So there won't be class on Tuesday of that week. So there should be a class on Tuesday the 8th on there, of October. On the schedule, it had presentations for those 2 weeks. So there won't be one on the Tuesday, mainly because Peter and I will be on planes coming back from Japan. We didn't realise that we were both going to do it on the same day. So presentation will start on the Wednesday. It'll be Wednesday and Friday that week, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday of the next week. So there'll be around 6-ish presentations per day, or per those. I will come up with a timetable, and I will let you know when your group is presenting. So remember that the presentations count for 10% of the mark. So the term paper is 35% total, 25% is for the document, 10% is for presentation. Of that 10%, 8% is for your presentation, 2% is peer review. So by peer review, I'm going to set up a rubric via an online web form, probably Microsoft Forms, and send it out to everybody and tell you who you have to mark. So part of your part of your grade will come from peer assessing other groups. So because I will send out a rubric of what you have to assess other groups on, you will know what other groups are also assessing you on as well. I plan to have that done by next week, so you will know in advance what you will be assessed on for your presentations. And then the 3 lectures the following week, so that's the last week of semester. On the Tuesday and Wednesday, I will go through a revision type lecture, and then I'll also give a lecture on, or give information about the final exam. So this class, the final exam, doesn't go to the library, so you won't be able to find past examples. I will tell you what's expected, what in a way you'll be assessed on, what you should be studying, and giving a few examples of this is the style of question that you may be asked in the exam. I've decided not to do a class on the last Friday. Does anybody want to come to class on Friday at 4:15, the last day of semester? I figure you'll either be celebrating the end of semester or you'll be getting ready for exams. So we'll have covered everything, and I will spend the last week doing a revision, an overall thing, and then what's going to be in the exam. So is everybody good? Does anybody have any questions about what is up there? For that, so I know how to use SolidWorks, but I taught myself how to use it. So I don't know, like I haven't actually gone through to teach someone else. If you email the workshop, so was the workshops, were they run by the same people, or was there a different one for each one? He did both of them? I would ask him for advice if there's anywhere to go to. I taught myself off YouTube. I'm not saying that I expect you to, but some things like that there are. But I would ask him, because he will be the one that will be consulting on it. So it's up to him if he has time, or if he's going to put another one on if there's people that need it. Everything else is okay? So today we will have the second lecture on cardiovascular, or on applications of biomaterials, focusing on cardiovascular ones, and we will go through stents and vascular grafts. So I've got here some examples of why you might need stents or vascular grafts if there is something wrong with your blood vessel. So if you have a whole lot of plaque build up, like here, and you get narrowing of the blood vessel, you might need a stent to push it out of the way and hold the blood vessel open so that you have normal blood flow going through it. So depending on where, and we'll go through which blood vessels it may come into account, and how much the size of blood vessels vary. So if it's one of your bigger arteries or bigger veins, you could probably have a metal stent put in. What happens if it's one of the smaller blood vessels, like the blood vessels that go around your heart? Is a stent or vascular graft appropriate? We will go through that. But then you'll see what happens here if you get plaque build up in these tiny little blood vessels. That's when someone might need a bypass. So a bypass here is an example. If it's a single, double, triple, or quadruple, you're taking blood that's from the aorta, it's bypassing and going into the chamber of the heart. So it's bypassing some of the other blood vessels and going in. So you're still getting blood flow. So all of these different conditions for why you need them, there's a lot of them. I'm not really going to specify what, well, I'll go into a little bit of detail of what may be used where, but we're more looking at what are blood vessels, what can go wrong with them, and how blood vessels vary. So I put this in here because I was looking through what I'm going to talk about in some of the other ones, and I realised I didn't really explain the anatomy of a blood vessel. So just quickly, the blood vessel has a number of different parts, and these will make sense when I go through some of the other bits. The main bits, you have the innermost layer of the blood vessel. So that's your endothelial layer, which is made up of endothelial cells. So that is the bit that the blood sees. So it's a thin layer of cells lining it. You then have this area here, which is smooth muscle cells. So there is actually a barrier between your endothelial cells and your smooth muscle cells. It's your basement membrane. But really what you should know about that is there is something that is keeping them apart. Your smooth muscle cells shouldn't go in a normal blood vessel, don't go through the endothelium and don't go into the lumen, into the blood vessel. So it's your endothelial cells on the inside, your smooth muscles on the outside. Here's really just the difference between a vein and an artery. You can see also more smooth muscles, more vascular. Sorry, not more smooth, more muscular. Ones are for pumping. You've got your arteries, which will pump blood, and your veins will take it back. So then it's just a change in the amount of muscle that you see there. The other thing is that wide range of vessel size that you get in your body. So it ranges from about 25 millimeters of your aorta, which is the largest one, down to about 8 microns in your capillaries, which 1, 2, 3, 4-ish orders of magnitude difference. So the size of blood vessels that you have in your body is very large. So in terms of thinking about stents and grafts, is one applicable to all? No. Particularly when you get down to the smaller vascular grafts. This is an assignment that I did when I was at undergrad about developing an artificial vascular graft for less than 6 millimeters. So 15, 20 years ago when I was studying, they hadn't come up with an issue then, and it's still, there are a lot of problems when it comes to the small vascular grafts because of how small they are, and I have a paper that's showing, looking at different materials to try and improve that. So stents, what do we use stents for? Mainly if someone has atherosclerosis, so that's the build-up of plaque in the blood vessel, where you saw that white matter, and it narrows the blood vessel, so your blood doesn't flow as well. You will use, that will affect large and medium-sized arteries. It'll affect the smaller ones as well, but you'll most likely use a stent to fix it if it's in the larger or medium-sized vessels. So if the mature plaques, what is going to be in them? Fat. Lipids, macrophages, so immune cells, cholesterol crystals as well. So what does it do? It's going to occlude the blood vessel, narrow it, you get less blood flow. And so then there's a whole other lot of downstream effects if you decrease blood flow in the body, the different organs, your peripheries, how that affects it. So the first report of a human coronary artery stent implantation was in 1986, but this was via a balloon catheter. So rather than putting something in there that was permanent, they took a balloon catheter, expanded the balloon so it pushed the plaque outside, it widened the vessels, but it wanted it back to, so it was able to get normal flow back, but it didn't have something there to keep it open. So whether or not the plaque built back up again, whether or not something had happened to the vessel walls and the muscles were a little bit weaker and it closed. So it was able to keep it open for a little while, but it wasn't permanent. So then in the 1980s, there was the first stent put in place where it was a bit of metal that was holding it open. So I'll go through bare metal stents and then I'll also introduce the drug-coated ones, but first about the metal ones. So it's made from a metal that you can expand. Has anyone seen a video of a stent being deployed? I'll show you another one because it also has a little bit about the manufacturing process as well. So a lot of the first ones were made of stainless steel, and I've put in there 316 stainless steel. That is a common type of stainless steel that is used in medical applications because of the properties that it is. A lot of it you will see that is the type. Cobalt chromium alloy, and a lot of them these days, not all of them. Have you heard of nitinol before? So a nitinol is a nickel titanium alloy. That's where they get the nitinol from. So I was looking through the different properties of nitinol, and these were the ones that were highlighted. So think about these as we go through some of the other bits and we watch the video. Nitinol has a shape memory effect. So if you want something that opens, well, not opens and closes, but you expand and you decrease, do you want it to have a shape memory effect? It is very elastic, particularly for a metal. That's not usually a property that you associate with a metal. So for this type of alloy, you can strain it up to 8% before you get permanent deformation. For a metal, that's pretty good. If you think about a blood vessel, or even how you would have to deploy this through it, the blood vessel's not straight. So even depending on where you put it, you may need curvature, but when you actually place it into the patient, it needs to be able to move, but then also with the elasticity, opening and closing. A blood vessel, it's not static, it's going to move. So you're going to want to have some sort of elasticity in the material as well for the function that it's going to have. So I went and had a look at,
Just a question about when you put a stent in, what stops it from having the blood clots go on the inside of it, given that it's going to be a flat surface? Once it goes and opens, it's going to be like a fine spot for it to spill back up again.
pretty much. And it's one of those things that also depends on what the underlying diseases the patient has, why they needed this, probably what medications they'll go on. That's where the difference also comes in between the bare metal stents, and I'll go through the drug-eluting stents as well. So these are just examples of the bare metal ones. You can still get bare metal ones. When I was having a look at what ones are available on the market, the majority of them are drug-eluting. And I was actually at a dinner a few months ago, and there was someone from Medtronic there, and I forget exactly what she said, but she essentially said, before drug-eluting stents came on the market, you would have, a patient would need it, but there are also a lot of complications involved with it, with thrombus, restenosis, so reclosing of the blood vessel. But then when the drug-eluting stents came in, it increased the success rate of stents. So depending on what drug it releases as well, so it's usually an antithrombotic or something that helps with endothelialization. But at the end of the day also, if plaque is reforming, it usually has to do with the patient's health and the diet and all those sorts of things. But yeah, it usually probably not going to stop it just by having that, it's just opening the blood vessel. So I found some companies that have them. These are ones, I'm assuming, because I was able to find the information on the company website, they're ones that are still available. They have different names for what they're called. So there's ones made out of nitinol. They've got the cobalt chromium alloys. There are still ones made from stainless steel and another cobalt chromium as well. I want you to have a look at also the design of them. So I will call it the structure for a better word, but the design of it. Why does it need to be like this? Flexibility. It needs to be able to expand and contract, and you want to have the right design and angles, and you'll see that in the video as well. But it is quite interesting how they're all in a way, to a degree, achieving the same thing, but have very different designs. And I'm sure a lot of the design process for stents goes into getting this pattern right, so it has the right properties for what it wants. So when you listen to this, I'll put on the video, and kind of take note, they talk a lot about the designing of it, what the requirements are of it for, and as they're saying this, think about what the materials I've talked about what some of their properties are, and are they picking the properties, or I guess you can start to see why they're picking those sorts of properties for these, it's not just the application, but what you want the device to do.
Advancing science for life should put you on the path towards the ideal treatment. One example is the Innova stent system, a culmination of smart R&D, design and engineering philosophies that not only created a new stent technology that thrives in the dynamic and challenging superficial femoral artery, but also a more intuitive delivery system, a stent system that is an ideal platform for future treatments. The Innova stent system started with the insights of over 100 physicians and 3 target characteristics that make an ideal stent for the SFA: outward radial force to reduce acute residual stenosis, flexibility to conform to the vessel, and durability to withstand the harsh biomechanical forces of the vessel. To find the design inputs that provided the best outputs, Boston Scientific explored more than 100 stent design iterations, tested numerous geometries and materials. The result is a hybrid architecture stent that delivers on each design and engineering target. Optimized strut dimensions for outward radial force, compression resistance, and durability. A peak to valley pattern that provides flexibility and a smooth lumen on any bend. Closed-end cells for deployment stability, and open middle cells for greater flexibility. A best-in-class peripheral stent, laser cut out of nitinol. With the Innova stent design, Boston Scientific turned its attention to the delivery system. Exploration and testing proved that a triaxial system would be an ideal platform to accurately deploy a stent in the SFA while simplifying the physician experience. The engineers designed this triaxial catheter system to be flexible enough to navigate tortuous anatomy with robust braided nylon shafts for stent deployment. The result is a delivery system with accurate deployment. For physicians, a more ideal treatment means an intuitive experience. An ergonomic system was designed by condensing the controls into a simplified ambidextrous handle, allowing most stents to be implanted one-handed. A dual deployment system that gives physicians both thumbnail and pull grip deployment mechanisms. Simple innovations that led to a delivery system that simplifies stenting procedures, improves predictability, accuracy, and delivers the widest size matrix of SFA stents. We've come a long way to better understanding the disease state in the SFA. We're using bare metal stents for more challenging cases, treating more patients than ever before. So what does the ideal treatment look like? It should be easier on everyone involved, patient as well as physician. It should be flexible, durable, with the right amount of radial force. It should be intuitive. And it should be a platform for drug-eluting treatments.
Okay, so some of it is obviously an ad for the company about how good their stent is, but there is some information in there about the design process, what they're designing to, what it needs to be done, and then also it's not just what you need inside the blood vessels, it's how it's going to be deployed, how it's going to travel up through the veins or arteries that it goes in to be put it into place. So there's a lot of things that need to take into account. But one thing that I noticed that they said, it started off with clinicians, but then obviously you've got engineers involved with it as well. As I've heard with any medical device, there's always a clinician involved because they know what is the gold standard or what is currently being used. They know what's going to be easy to use and what they want. But then also, he talked about 3 properties that they designed it to. So you've got the radial force, but then it could withstand the compression as well. So with the blood vessels, you've got the pulsing, so it's not going to collapse on itself, but yet it's going to withstand the radial force of the blood as it goes through as well. But then it has to be able to flexible as well. So in terms of design criteria for not just a material, but then the actual design of it as well. So it's quite interesting, and that's how you can, I guess how I can see, there are as many different designs that different companies have come up with, because they're all making them for the same application, but they're going to have slightly, and then that's how they may differ themselves from other companies as well. I've then got in there, what are some of the issues that you think might be involved with bare metal stents? You're putting a piece of metal into a blood vessel. So when we were talking about the blood contacting lecture, thrombus, it's always going to be something. So is it activating the platelets? In a way, it's, in terms of changing blood flow, you're opening up a vessel that's already quite occluded, so it's got, you're fixing bad blood flow. So you're going to be making the blood flow better, but how that may change different coagulation properties. But it's still, you're making blood flow better rather than making it worse. So you may not get, often you'll see if there's something in the way of a blood vessel, you'll change the blood flow and you'll change fluid dynamic properties. Really, you're opening it so it helps that. You are implanting something into a blood vessel that you want to be permanent. Foreign body response. Are you going to get some foreign body response, and then also the fibrous capsule? So fibrous capsule, in a way here, think about, you have the endothelial layer, which is really a very fine layer of cells. It's not very thick. Putting the stent in place there, has it disrupted it? Has it made, and then in a way, what stops the smooth muscle cells from coming in is that endovascular layer. Have you disrupted it? Is now somewhere that the endovascular cells can come in. They can proliferate, they will proliferate. Do you want smooth muscle cells inside? And I've mentioned it, and they even mentioned in the video how you have a device that has the right mechanical properties, has the right design, it's flexible, it can withstand radial pressure and compression. You then just want it to modulate how the body then interacts with it. How do you do that? A lot of companies then have the drug-eluting stents. I've just picked one, mainly because a lot of the other companies, it is very similar to what they do. They have slight differences, and that's how different companies are going to have their products may differ, or are going to differ over other ones. So this is just one of the Terumo ones. All of the other companies that were listed on the other page had them as well. So for this one, the Terumo, they put on a bioresorbable polymer coating. So their coating is made out of polylactic acid and polycaprolactone. I don't know what the properties of both those polymers are to know what the degradation rates. I am assuming that they're wanting it to degrade over a few months. This image here was also on their website, and so it's a schematic of how the polymer coating does degrade. So it starts off here after implantation, and they've got pretty much after 3 to 4 months that drug-eluting polymer coating should have degraded. I don't know if that was the same for all of the stents, but this is just one example. Notice on the design whereabouts they put the polymer. It's not on these bits. It's only on these bits. So in terms of a design of the stent, what is going to compress, for a better word, as it's being put in, what it's being deployed in, as it come out, you probably, the longer struts aren't going to move as much, whereas here, if it's closing, it'll come down, and as it opens, it'll go back up. So you're not putting the drug on there. Why would you not put the drug on there? If that's moving, could then a bit of it come off as well. You probably don't want bits of the drug-eluting polymer to go free into the blood vessels. They've put it on there so that it's still associated with the stent, but it's on one of the places that's not going to be moving within the device as it's being either deployed or in its use. So as the blood vessel expands and contracts as it's moving or pumping blood around, these bits will have movement, whereas these bits are less likely. I didn't look too much into what type of drugs they put in, because it's usually anticoagulants. The patients will go on anticoagulants. You're probably wanting to stop or help revascularization as well. So you want, can you see here, this is what they want to happen after the 4 months. This very thin layer, you want it to revascularize. Sorry, I'm saying the wrong words. You want it to re-endothelialize. So you want a layer of endothelial cells to grow over, but you don't want there to be smooth muscles. So you want it to look like the lining of a blood vessel, but that's it. And that's quite hard to control. So that's what they're trying to do with the drug-eluting stents. I thought this image was pretty cool, so I just thought I'd show it. How do you know where it goes? How do you know if there's an issue? So quite often, the patient will have some sort of imaging technique. So you can imaging it without putting in a tracer in the blood. Sometimes you need to put a tracer in the blood. But you can see the before one. So it's a fluoroscopic representation. So the before one, someone has a narrowed blood vessel. The stent goes in, it widens, and they have blood flow again. But what are some of the issues that can go wrong with the patient? So this is a H&E image. What does H&E show? Where you see pink, there is tissue. You can't see too much purple because it's not a high enough magnification. And here also, you should be able to see red. So red is usually blood, a whole lot of red. What's a whole lot of red? Thrombus. In this image as well, can you make out where, so if it's a cross-section of a blood vessel and you've got a stent in there and they've cut through the stent, can you see where the struts of the stent are? So if, imagine you're wanting a stent to be in a blood vessel and you want that to be on the layer, like it's coming into contact with the endothelial layer. You want it to re-endothelialize. Do you really want as much tissue as has grown in there to occur? No. So these are some of the issues that go wrong. So with this one, they're saying, or that one of the some of the things that they point out, they're seeing a whole lot of necrotic tissue. All this black stuff here. And where the arrows are pointing here, here and here is where it's being magnified. So after this period of time, necrotic tissue, you've got stuff that's dying in the blood vessel. You're not wanting that. In C, you've got neointima occurring. So what does that mean? That means where smooth muscle cells have broken through the endothelial layer and are then within the lumen of it, and you're creating smooth muscle here. So this was the original blood vessel. You've got the stent, and then you've got all the smooth muscles coming into there. And then the next image here, that there, great. Red on red doesn't really work very well, obviously. Thrombus, so great big blood clots. And this is just from one patient. It is a drug-eluting stent, and he had it in for a fair while. He had it in past the time frame that the drug part had come off, and then all of a sudden something went wrong. So it also shows that sometimes things can just go wrong. There is patient variability. And after the autopsy, they cut it out. And these are just different sections along the blood vessel. So it's really what issues can occur with it. If you're going to get restenosis, so your smooth muscle cells coming in, the blood vessel is going to close and it's going to be smaller again. You can have the same sorts of issues. Do we have a solution for this? I would say no, only because sometimes it will work in a patient, sometimes it won't, and when it doesn't, sometimes it usually comes down to it's a patient variable rather than a device. So there's something little tiny that it set it off in the patient that hasn't set it off with some other people. But the drug-eluting stents have improved how well these work, but with a lot of medical devices, it's not 100%. But are there things that we can do in the future to make them better? Quite possibly, yes. Okay, vascular grafts. So the majority, or the early vascular grafts, were made from synthetic materials. Vascular grafts, particularly the synthetic ones, you will see in the larger blood vessels. So in your aorta, not necessarily in the smaller ones. Well, you will, but the success rate in the smaller ones is a lot less. You'll usually see them made from Dacron or EPTFE. So EPTFE also has or PTFE may also be known as Dacron. Sorry, not Dacron, Teflon. I'm getting all of my different commercial names mixed up. Teflon. So you have Teflon vascular grafts. Depending on which ones they are, can be porous, particularly the EPTFE. The E stands for expanded. So if you look at those ones under a microscope, they do look quite porous, how they have treated the PTFE. So depending on what blood vessel it's going into, well, really you want it to re-endothelialize. Having a porous structure can help that. So they do go quite well in the larger blood vessels, but it's the smaller blood vessels that the failure rate or the patency of them, so how likely they are to succeed, is not very high. It still is around 50%. Autologous ones are the most common rather than synthetic. However, think about a patient who needs some sort of vascular graft. If they need a smaller vessel one, it's probably the smaller vessels around the heart that they need bypass for. If they have blocked vessels there, what may be the situation of their other blood vessels in their body? Sometimes doctors can get healthy ones, sometimes not. And there's a whole lot of literature also about which blood vessels they take from the body to use for this as well. You can't just take any of them. Some are different. Well, a vein has different property to an artery, obviously. But gold standard is the patient's own blood vessels, but if that's not possible, then synthetic. So here's some examples of some vascular grafts. So the ones on this side are from the company called Terumo. So Terumo also made the stents as well. And I know Terumo because they make blood bag products as well. So they do a lot of devices that come in contact with blood. So on the website it's called Gel Soft. So it's a type of polyester graft. I have also seen references to Terumo make a lot of the Dacron. But the Dacron and polyester, I need to have a look. They're quite similar, but whether or not they're the exact same. But it's a polymer that's obviously, you want something that's flexible, can withstand, like with the stent, the pressure that it's going to be under from blood flow. Particularly think about, it's the larger blood vessels, aorta, the amount of pressure that you have in that sort of vessel to pump the blood and the volumes of blood that are going through there. Another type of material that they're made out of is Gore-Tex. Has anybody heard Gore-Tex before? Does anybody own a Gore-Tex jacket? Yep. So there is a company in the US called Gore who make Gore-Tex for clothes, and they make Gore-Tex for medical devices. It's very similar. It's the same starting material. What does it, at the end of the day, what does it come down to? How it's then processed. But do you have a polymer? Flexible, very durable, depending on where it goes or what you do to it. You may get, and you want re-endothelialization. Some of them also had a lot, particularly, well, you can see in the Terumo ones, it's got a gelatin sealed or gelatin coated. So they've put gelatin, it's a byproduct, well, no, it's a gelatin is, if you break down collagen, you get gelatin. So it's an ECM protein, putting it on there. So there are ways that you can modify these to make them interact with the body different ways. So one of the issues, or one of the things that you're trying to overcome with a vascular graft is, what is it, anastomosis? I think I'm saying it right? Yep. Anastomosis. So, does anybody know what anastomosis is? I think I've mentioned it before. Well, you're connecting, it's really the joining of the two vessels. You're putting in a vascular graft into an existing blood vessel. How is it going to join? And this just shows, this image here is a representation of what's going on. You have the native blood vessel, you then have your vascular graft. Over time, you want your vascular graft to endothelialize. How does that usually occur? You get the endothelial cells from the native blood vessel will start to migrate along the blood vessel and re-endothelialize. It's going to happen from both ends. If it's going to be shorter, it's going to be a lot quicker than if it's going to be longer. And here's just some examples or images of also that occurring. So here you've got your graft and you've got H&E. So this would have been part of your blood vessel, and then you've got your endothelial layer, which is starting to go across there. And this is just an SEM. You can see a barrier. So one part is going to be your endothelial cells, and the other part is going to be your graft where they've started to go across. So because vascular grafts are in a bigger blood vessel, or these types of vascular grafts, if you get the smaller ones, and that's why the larger ones have a higher success rate. They're quite large. The blood flow or the clotting, you need a very big blood clot to clot the large vascular grafts. So you may get smaller ones, but it's not going to include the graft. But you're wanting to get re-endothelialization occurring, so it then looks more like a native vascular graft. So I've got a graph here that shows the graft patency, so the success rate of different vascular grafts. I guess it's really just highlighting, particularly for the small diameter ones, the failure rate of them is, when I say quite high, I think I said before, it's around 50%. If you have a 50% success rate of a medical device, Is that, I guess, to me, that's not good. That's quite high failure rates. So here they are comparing the coloured in dots are, they've used patients' autologous blood vessels. The open ones are where they've got PTFE ones. The PTFE is open, and then you've got the same ones depending on what shape it is for the autologous. You can clearly see that a patient's blood vessel has a much higher success rate than the ePTFE ones. So the last few slides that I'm going to go through is what are people trying to do to increase the success rate of small diameter vascular grafts. They're often used for bypass. So these sorts of surgeries occur quite often, but other than using the patient's blood vessels, we don't have a very good synthetic or even biological alternative. So this is looking at different materials. So the gold standard, or the main one that's used, I mentioned before, is ePTFE. So it's an expanded version. So it becomes a little bit more porous. In this paper, it shows you a nice SEM images, and you can see the porous, but I didn't put that in. So here, this paper is comparing electrospun silk to ePTFE and seeing how well it goes. These images here are looking at the mechanical properties of the graft. So depending on how you manufacture the material, so when you do electrospinning, do you guys know about electrospinning? Did you go through it? And they did electrospinning on a mandrel, so you can make tubes. So that's how they made the vascular graft. So depending on what size your mandrel is, you can then make a tube with a certain internal diameter. So they're looking at the mechanical properties. Here, where you see the red bars, they're comparing a rat aorta. So they've actually taken out the blood vessel that they want to replace and have done the same mechanical properties with that as compared to the different materials. The grey bars are silk and the black bars are ePTFE. So if you're looking at E is Young's modulus, F is UTS, and G is elongation, so the different types of mechanical properties. Just comparing them there, particularly with the Young's modulus and the UTS, the ePTFE is way higher than the rat aorta. And looking at silk, I'm not saying it's the same, but it has more comparable mechanical properties to the the silk is more comparable to the rat aorta than the ePTFE. So I guess the other thing is you want something that's strong, but if it is too stiff, depending on which mechanical property you're looking at, is it going to behave nicely when you implant it? Then they also had a look at burst pressure, which is I, and J is suture pull-out. So if you're wanting to put, or when you're grafting the vascular graft in, if you put a suture in it and can easily be pulled out, that is clearly going to be a failure rate of it. So for the grafts, I guess, sorry, for the silk, comparing it ex vivo, so doing in vitro tests, it looks quite comparable to the rat aorta, particularly compared to the common material, ePTFE. So then they implanted it into the rats. You can see some of the images, day 0, 6 weeks, 24 weeks. Particularly with the 6 weeks, so the 6 weeks and 24 are the different ones. How do you know if a material is starting to, before you do histology, become integrated? I guess if you're seeing redness, there's blood flow around there, or there's blood vessels starting to form. So it's an indication. You would have to do histology to look at how well that is going. But also look at the survival rate. With silk, all of the animals that had the graft inserted over this time period survived, whereas not all of, I forget what the number is off the top of my head. To me that looks around the 75% mark-ish. So we'll say the exact one. So here you've also got, at the 24-week time, you've got improved survival rate with one graft over the other. With the vascular graft, particularly the smaller ones, clotting is a big problem. Restenosis is also as well. So they had a look at granulation tissue response and then also foreign body response with different macrophages. So the H&E images, where the arrow is showing you how much granulation tissue has formed over time and how much that is shrinking. So you can see over the period that it's being implanted. There is a lot of granulation tissue at first, but it's not staying there. It's shrinking, it's, I won't say becoming part of the animal, but you're not getting a prolonged granulation tissue response. You want some, you don't want it to be sustained. So, for where it says CD68, CD68 is a marker on macrophage cell surfaces. So here, where you see red, it's where macrophages are. So if you look at the amount of red on these images, there's a whole lot. At 3 weeks, okay, there's going to be a big inflammatory response, but is that sustained or does that start to go away over time? By 24 weeks, there's a few. You're always going to have a few macrophages. You're not going to get rid of them completely. But you're seeing a decrease in the inflammatory response over time, which is, you want a bit to start off with, but you don't want it to be sustained. So here they were creating a vascular graft that was performing better, particularly for a smaller diameter vascular graft than what the current standards are using. So this went into a paper about preclinical trials. So they would have been doing these sorts of animal studies, comparing their material to what is on the market. How does that improve? Collecting this sort of data to then go into more, I guess, you might go into larger animals. These were done in rats before going into human trials. So it's these sorts of experiments that you need to do beforehand to show proof of principle that it is working. You've made something that is improving what there was before, or it works better than what is currently being used. So that is all I'm going to cover for cardiovascular. As usual, please read what is in the textbook as well. I've added to the textbook. Tomorrow, I hope it's okay, I decided not to do another cardiovascular. I wanted to do one about ocular devices, so contact lenses, things like that, which there's a nice chapter in the textbook, and it wasn't covered before, but I think is also, to me, it's one of those medical devices that's often overlooked. But a lot of people have contacts, and I guess if you don't get one that works very nice, you can have a lot of problems. So with that, are there any questions? If not, I guess I will see you guys tomorrow.